They locked me in the kitchen. At my own daughter's wedding. Said the caterer bailed, and someone had to step up. But I saw it, through the cracked pantry door. My ex-husband, giving our daughter away. And around her neck? My mother's gold locket. The one he told me was lost in the move. The one I hadn't seen since the day he served me papers. I wiped my hands on the apron they gave me. Smiled. That's fine. The bride got her father. But she's about to meet her mother. I didn't mind waking up early. Some habits don't fade just because the marriage did. The morning light filtered through lace curtains, soft and gray. I sat at the table with a chipped mug, same one I used when Lila was teething. Same one I held during her first heartbreak, when I didn't say I told you so. They had booked me a room above the venue kitchen. Not with the family. Not at the resort. I was told it was closer to where you'll be helping. Helping. I suppose that was the word now. I stirred the cake batter by hand. They said the mixer was broken. It wasn't. I had brought the vanilla from my mother's cabinet. The same kind she used in the pies that made Lila giggle as a child. I even wore the same apron, the one with embroidered flowers at the hem. Except now the flowers looked tired. Threadbare. No one said good morning. The wedding planner gave me a clipboard and a time slot. Keep out of sight once guests arrive, please. We're trying to maintain the aesthetic. I nodded. Didn't even ask what that meant. The veil I stitched by hand, weeks of work, was credited to a boutique. I overheard the stepmother showing it off at the rehearsal dinner. She picked it off the rack. Lila has great taste. I wasn't introduced. No toasts. My name was on the seating chart, but not at the family table. I was between a florist and the DJ assistant. Still, I stayed. Because my daughter was getting married. Because I remembered the soft smell of her baby blanket. Because I'd waited years for this day, to see her happy. I let the silence wrap around me like an old shawl. There were moments, small and raw, when I could still pretend this was joy. Like when I held the ring pillow. Or when I saw her dress hanging in the window. The same window where she once drew hearts in the fog. Back then, she used to ask me to braid her hair. Now, she asked me not to wear lipstick that might clash with the theme. I pressed the hem of her gown the night before. Found a tiny wine stain near the back, probably from the bachelorette party. I cleaned it without a word. Didn't want her embarrassed. Didn't want her to know I cried over the spot. Because it was the only mark she'd made that still needed me. They say time heals. But sometimes it just teaches you how to keep your voice low. How to fold yourself small. How to love without being seen. At the rehearsal, when the officiant asked if anyone had any special family traditions, her stepmother spoke first. Talked about a southern pound cake recipe passed down from her mother. I stood there, holding the original recipe card from mine. Nobody asked about it. Or me. Afterward, someone gave me a broom and said the flower petals needed sweeping. I swept. Like I had for decades. Birthdays, breakups, tantrums, triumphs. I swept them all behind me. And smiled. The night before the wedding, I sat on the balcony alone. I could see the rows of white chairs, perfectly aligned, waiting for morning. And I remembered Lila at age 7, lining up her stuffed animals for a practice wedding. She'd made me officiate. Her bear wore a bow tie. She made me promise I'd always be there when she got married. I'll wear your earrings, Mama, she said. I want you right next to me. I still had those earrings. But she never asked for them. Her stepmother lent her pearls. I tried to be grateful. Try not to think too much. But there's a different kind of ache that comes when you're not just forgotten, you're edited out. When you become a worker in a story you once wrote. At 3 a.m., I got up to prep the pies. The venue was quiet. The lights in the ballroom flickered as if unsure whether to stay on. I measured every spoonful with care. Even left a note beside the serving tray. Peach cobbler, no cinnamon. Bride's favorite. Signed it, Love, Mom. Then crossed it out. Just wrote, kitchen staff. I was never truly lonely. Just quietly replaced. And when I looked in the mirror that morning, hair pinned back, flower on my cheek, I didn't see a mother of the bride. I saw a ghost in a borrowed apron. Smiling. Silent. Still trying to give her daughter the perfect day. Even if it meant she had to disappear from it. The shift didn't come like a scream. It came like a click. A gentle tap of something landing where it shouldn't. I was folding linens in the kitchen, early light skimming across the counter. They had asked me to prepare the refreshment trays, slice the fruit, stay tucked away. It was the way people talk to a shadow that might still have ears. The clipboard was left on the counter. Next to it, a printed seating chart. I glanced, not meaning to. My eyes weren't looking for trouble. They were just tired. I found my name. Row 6. Table 18. Marked under, vendor support. Not family. Not even guest. The font was small, cold, distant. Next to my name was a tiny note. Please dress modestly. I stood still for a long time. Didn't cry. Didn't move. Just let the moment stack itself on top of all the others. Then I noticed it. In the trash beside the counter, a torn envelope. The kind my ex-husband always used. Formal. Heavy paper. The corner was folded, but the handwriting was his. I'd spent 20 years reading that handwriting. On grocery lists, anniversary cards, apology notes, tax forms. This one read, "To Lila from Grandma." I reached for it without thinking. It smelled faintly of cedar and old paper. My breath caught. There was a smudge of red lipstick on the flap. My mother's lipstick. The same she wore at her last Thanksgiving. The envelope had been opened. Carefully. Surgically. I looked closer. Something had snagged the inside. A tear near the seal. I traced it with my finger and felt the shape, oval, thin, with a tiny break in the hinge. The locket. I hadn't seen it in over 15 years. The last time I touched it, I was packing my things. After the divorce. He told me he couldn't find it. Said it must have been lost in the shuffle, maybe thrown out accidentally. I had cried in the driveway. Not over the house. Not over the marriage. Over that locket. It held a photo of my mother on one side, and a photo of baby Lila on the other. That morning, standing by the kitchen sink, I remembered something strange. The clasp had always been faulty. My mother told me it popped open easily. I turned the envelope over. There, taped discreetly to the back flap, was a strip of felt, the kind jewelers used to line boxes. A smudge of gold remained. It had been there. Recently. Someone had made sure it looked like a gift. But not from me. From Grandma. A woman 10 years gone. Who had written no letter. Who had sent no gift. Who would have never given that locket to a man she didn't trust. The sound came again. That click. Not in the room. In my chest. Not anger. Not sadness. Just a door closing behind me. The music from upstairs started. Someone testing the speaker system. Strings and piano. Wedding playlist. I folded the envelope in half. Slid it into the drawer beneath the tea towels. Didn't tear it. Didn't scream. Didn't storm into the ballroom. I just stood there, holding the edge of the counter, letting the air fill my lungs slowly. Then I walked to the prep table. Tied the apron tighter. Rolled out the final crust for the mini pies. My hands moved like they always did. Muscle memory. Recipe in my bones. But something had gone quiet inside me. Not still. Just quiet. Like the part of a song where the notes vanish and only breath remains. That was the moment it all shifted. The bride was already in her dress. The groom was adjusting his tie. The guests were arriving. The photos had already started. And somewhere in that ballroom, under a veil and a smile, my daughter was wearing a stolen story around her neck. The kitchen lights buzzed overhead. I turned them off, stood in the soft half-dark, and whispered to no one. The room is silent, but everything inside me is screaming. But I didn't move. Not yet, because some things like revenge, like truth, need to bake. It didn't start with the locket. That was just the sharpest edge. The little hurts had been lining up for years. Not loud enough to name. Just quiet enough to doubt myself every time. Like the time she asked me not to wear lipstick to the bridal brunch. Said the color I wore was too loud for the photos. It was the same shade I wore to her kindergarten graduation. The one she once called my magic smile color. I wiped it off in the car. Told myself the camera needed softer tones. Excused it. Then there were the robes. Silky, rose-colored, with names stitched on the backs in gold. Bride. Maid of honor. Best friend. Stepmom. No robe for me. No name stitched in gold. I watched them giggle and sip mimosas while I ironed the napkins in the laundry room. No one noticed I hadn't been called for the getting ready photos. When I asked, Lila just smiled tight and said, "Oh, they only booked a certain number of shots. You understand, right?" I nodded. Of course I understood. I always understood. At the rehearsal dinner, I was seated between the florist and someone's teenage cousin. Everyone else gave speeches. I was told there wasn't time for one more. Her stepmother stood and raised a glass. Said, "Watching Lila grow into the woman she is has been the greatest joy of my life." People clapped. Lila reached for her hand. My stomach turned to stone. I smiled. Kept smiling. even when the waitress brought me the wrong meal and no one noticed I hadn't eaten. The night before the wedding, I found the gift I had wrapped for Lila still unopened. It was the blue hair comb I wore on my own wedding day. The one my mother gave me. I'd polished it. Wrote a note. It sat on the corner of the counter untouched. The bridesmaids had given her matching anklets. Those made it into the photo. The comb. I tucked it back in my suitcase. No need to force history into a space it wasn't wanted. The photographer asked to take a few generational shots of the women in the family. They took 3. Bride and stepmom. Bride and stepmom with grandmother's portrait. Bride and stepaunt. I stood behind the folding screen holding safety pins. They said the lighting was better that way. I remember one moment during the rehearsal, the way Lila leaned into her father's side. The same way she used to lean into mine when she had night terrors. Back when I'd crawl into her twin bed, rub her back, hum the lullaby my mother sang to me. She didn't remember that, of course. Why would she? Memories are heavy things. Children drop them when they run too fast toward adulthood. Even the cake had changed. She used to beg me for strawberry shortcake every year. Now she wanted lemon lavender with cream cheese rosettes. Her stepmother's favorite. I baked it anyway. 3 tiers. Hand-pressed edible flowers. She said nothing when she saw it. Not even a thank you. But I caught her whispering to someone later. She really does make the best things, just not the best decisions. I pretended I didn't hear it. Pretended a lot of things that weekend. That I didn't notice the favors were all from her stepmother's Etsy shop. That my name wasn't listed in the wedding program's thank you section. That the guestbook photo of our family cropped me out. But the thing that finally tore a little stitch loose was breakfast. Wedding day morning. I made French toast, her favorite as a child, with cinnamon and a sprinkle of powdered sugar. Set it out in the kitchen before anyone else woke up. She came in, hair in rollers, phone in hand. Saw the plate. And said, "Ugh, that smells like daycare. Can we open a window?" She didn't even know it was me. Didn't ask. Didn't pause. I scraped the plate into the bin. And still, I stood there, smoothing down the fabric of her gown later that afternoon. Pinning the edge of her veil when no one else knew how. Stepping back when the photographer said, "Let's get one of the real family." These were the little cuts. Soft, precise. Never deep enough to bleed in public. Just enough to ache when I turned my head too fast. I remembered the first time I saw her in a dress, age 5, twirling in the kitchen in her Easter outfit. She had powdered sugar on her cheeks. And when she spun, she said, "I look like a mommy." Now she spun for someone else's camera. And I stood behind a closed pantry door, slicing fruit, while my daughter walked down the aisle in silence. No one asked where I was. No one came looking. And that's when I understood. I hadn't been forgotten. I had been edited out. A cleaner story. A prettier photo. A mother without a shadow. The music started overhead. Soft strings, the kind meant to make people cry for the right reasons. I was still in the kitchen. Door bolted from the outside. They said it was to keep the breeze from blowing in. But the lock clicked in a way that told the truth. The pies were cooling. Plates stacked. Candles lit in the chafing dishes. Everything perfect. Except me. I leaned back against the counter, felt the metal edge dig into my spine. Let it hurt. Didn't move. Through the floorboards above, I could hear heels clicking, laughter. Her voice lifted and light. The same voice that once called out, "Mama, I'm scared." In the middle of the night, when thunderstorms cracked the window. She used to climb into my bed with her stuffed rabbit. Always cold feet. Always reaching for my hand. I closed my eyes. And suddenly I was back in the hospital 26 years ago. Holding her for the first time. Her cheeks red from crying. Her fingers curling around mine. My ex-husband had brought roses. But it was my mother who brought the locket. Placed it in my palm and whispered, "She's yours, heart to heart." I never wore it for myself. Always said it was for Lila when she was ready. For her wedding day. Her becoming. But there I was now, in a borrowed kitchen. Watching a legacy twisted into a prop. I moved toward the small window above the sink. It was too high to see anything. Just clouds and treetops. But I looked anyway. The apron strings at my back had come loose. I let them fall. Didn't tie them again. On the far shelf, half hidden under a stack of trays, was something old. Dull aluminum. The pie tin I'd used since Lila's 2nd birthday. I flipped it over instinctively. There they were. The letters scratched into the base. ML, my mother's initials. She gave it to me after her stroke. Said, make sweet things even when life tastes bitter. I held it in both hands. It smelled like cinnamon and quiet heartbreak. But someone had labeled it with a piece of tape. Blue ink. Sharp lettering. For staff use only. That's when something in me let go. Not loudly. Just quietly. Like a rope that slips through your fingers until there's nothing left to hold. I slid down to the floor, back against the cabinet. Laid the tin in my lap. Let my arms fall to my sides. And I whispered to the empty air. Empty. Forgotten. Perfect. No one came. No one knocked. The music swelled. Someone laughed. Champagne cork popped. Hearts toasted. Above my head, my daughter danced without me. Photographed without me. Carried my mother's locket like a stolen blessing. I thought about going upstairs. Bursting into the reception. Screaming what I knew. Saying what no one wanted to hear. But I couldn't. Not because I was afraid. Because I was done. Done folding myself smaller. Done excusing what they called wedding stress, or just a mix-up. Done waiting for someone to notice the mother of the bride wasn't standing next to the bride. I reached into my pocket and pulled out the recipe card. Faded, creased, corners curled. My mother's handwriting still steady. Peach pie, no cinnamon. Lila's favorite. The ink had smudged near the top years ago. A tear, maybe. Or a spill. I couldn't remember anymore. I held it to my chest. Felt the beat of something that used to be called hope. Now just rhythm. Survival. Have you ever remembered something small? Just when everything felt like it was falling apart. A scent. A corner of handwriting. A name you once whispered with joy. And it unravels you. Not into rage, but into silence so deep it feels holy. That's what it felt like. I sat there, not moving, for what felt like hours. No one checked. No one called. And I realized I could stay there forever. And it wouldn't ruin their day. Wouldn't even delay the cake. They'd cut it without me. Toast without me. Smile without the woman who carried the weight. Who held the door. Who remembered every allergy and every heartbreak. I wasn't needed. Not really. Just tolerated. The kind of person you keep behind the curtain. So no one sees where the seams begin. And that's when I knew. Not that they didn't love me. But that they loved me conditionally. As long as I stayed useful. Quiet. Uncomplicated. I set the pie tin beside me. Unfolded my legs. Stood. Not fast. Not theatrical. Just done. The oven beeped. A reminder I had set hours ago. I turned it off. Wiped the counter with one clean stroke. Straightened the cutting board. Pulled my name badge from my shirt. Dropped it in the sink. And opened the drawer. Where I had hidden the envelope. The one addressed from a ghost. I held it flat in my hands. Then folded it into thirds. Carefully. Precisely. Like someone writing their final sentence. There's a kind of power that doesn't come from raising your voice. It comes from lowering it to nothing. I didn't scream. Didn't call anyone out. Didn't break dishes or demand my place at the table. I just took off the apron. Folded it into a perfect square. Placed it on the counter beside the pie tin. Then I reached for the window. Small. High. Cracked at the corner. It slid open with a whine. Old wood and rusted hinges. But it opened. I pulled the chair over. The one no one ever sat in. The one labeled prep only. Stepped onto the seat in bare feet. And climbed through. My hands caught the gravel. Dress snagged. One heel snapped. I kicked them both off. Walked barefoot behind the venue. Down the path where deliveries were made. Where no one thought to look. I didn't run. Didn't rush. The air smelled of cake and roses and lavender perfume. Someone else's signature scent. I made my way to the bridal suite. Empty. Soft music playing through a Bluetooth speaker. Half a glass of champagne on the vanity. Lipstick-stained rim. Not mine. Her veil was tossed over the chair. The same chair I had bought when she got her first apartment. Vintage. Oak legs. She said it made her feel classic. Now it just looked tired. I moved slowly. Unsnapped the locket that had been left there beside a pile of bobby pins. The hinge was cracked. The photo inside. The one that said to Lila from Grandma. But wasn't. I tucked it under a row of mascara tubes and false lashes. Let her find it later. Let her wonder. Then I took the old pie tin from my bag. Set it on the vanity. Turned it upside down, initials up. ML. 3 generations of women, pressed into metal. And I walked away. Silent scene. No one saw me. No one stopped me. No one needed to. Power isn't always taken. Sometimes it's returned. Outside, the music swelled again. Cheers erupted. I heard my ex-husband's voice through the speakers, giving a toast he once promised I would share with him. Back when we still believed in shared things. He said, "To the beautiful bride, and to the woman who helped her become who she is today." They all turned to the stepmother. Of course they did. I didn't stop walking. I passed the garden, where the catering van was parked, where children ran barefoot between the hedges, untouched by the weight of names. I stopped only once, beside the mailbox near the venue office. The same one where all the RSVP cards had been sorted, where mine had arrived late, where the woman behind the desk said, "Oh, we weren't sure you'd be attending. You were a maybe, right?" I pulled my RSVP from my bag. It had never been mailed. I had written the yes in pen, then erased it, then rewritten it, over and over again, until the paper tore slightly at the fold. I slipped it into the slot now, let it fall without a stamp. It didn't matter anymore. Then I walked down the gravel path, away from the music, away from the programs, away from the cake that bore my recipe but not my name. No one saw me leave. No phone buzzed. No voice called after me. I passed the rose arbor where we had taken family photos years ago. Me, my mother, my daughter. 3 faces in bloom. Now cropped out, deleted, replaced. I didn't slam the door. There was no door to slam. Only air, and sky, and silence, and me. I reached the edge of the woods, where the trail met the road, where the cars were parked. Pulled off my necklace. Not the locket, just a small charm she made me when she was 7. #OneMom scrawled in uneven paint. I kissed it once, then left it hanging on the fence, for her to find. Or not. Maybe one day she'll remember. Maybe she won't. But I will. Because power, real power, is not in the scream. It's in the walk away. Barefoot. Uninvited. Unapologetic. Viewer reflection. Have you ever stayed quiet just to keep the peace? And when you finally stopped, did the silence feel like thunder? It was 2 weeks after the wedding when the letter arrived. Plain envelope. No return address. Legal size. Heavy. I almost threw it out. I'd stopped checking the mail regularly. Stopped expecting anything that wasn't a bill or a reminder to renew something I no longer needed. But this was different. Thick paper. Old handwriting. Inside, there was a photocopy of my mother's will. Not the one I signed at probate. A different one. Older, but with my name in it. Clear as daylight. To my daughter, the house, the locket, and all contents of the cedar chest. I sat on the porch holding that page like it might burn through my palms. The house. The locket. The cedar chest. The house had been sold 4 years ago. Quietly. Transferred through a trust Lila didn't know she was listed on. Set up by her father. I had thought it strange when he handled the paperwork after my mother passed. Said it was easier if one of us just took care of the estate. I was grieving. He was calculating. He told me there was no will. Just a verbal intention. And he had me sign a release form, saying it was best not to drag it through court. Think of Lila, he said. Your mother would want things peaceful. I didn't know what I was signing. But I did it. Because back then I still believed in family. Still thought my silence was noble. The locket had disappeared that same month. I asked him once. Just once. He looked me dead in the eye and said, "Probably tossed during the move. Can't save everything." And now, here it was. Proof. In paper and ink. That I had been written in, then written out. The letter came with no note. Just the will. Folded, creased, weighted with truth. I sat there until the sun moved off the porch. The air changed. Soft wind. Scent of old leaves and burned sugar. Familiar. I walked to the back of the house. To the cedar trunk I'd taken with me after the divorce. I'd kept it locked all these years. Out of habit. Out of hurt. Inside, buried beneath baby blankets and photo albums, was a bundle of letters. My mother's handwriting. Some unopened. Some never sent. One envelope was addressed to me. Dated just weeks before her stroke. I opened it with shaking hands. Inside was a single line. If you find this, it means he lied. No signature. No anger. Just the facts. He lied. I sat there, my knees pressed against the floor, surrounded by the things I thought were safe. Things I thought had been mine. My childhood pressed into parchment and lace. My legacy, rewritten by a man I once married. And my daughter, unknowing or not, was wearing the symbol of that lie around her neck. Not because she stole it, but because he handed it to her like a sacred gift. With no explanation. Just a story polished to shine. The cracked locket. The same one I'd traced with my thumb as a girl. The one that always popped open. Now shut tight. But not by love. By revision. And the picture inside. I remembered now. It used to be a photo of my mother and me, side by side at her stove, aprons tied. Lila in the background, just a blur of toddler joy. That image had been cut out. Swapped. Replaced with one I'd seen at the wedding. A photo of Lila and her stepmother on a beach. Smiling. Framed. You don't need fire to erase someone. Just scissors. And time. I pressed the old will to my chest. Sat still. They didn't just forget me. They erased me. Not by accident. By intention. By paperwork. By photo frames turned sideways. There's a grief that doesn't wail. It hums. Low and constant. Like a stove left on in another room. Like something you feel before you hear it. I stayed there all night. Reading my mother's words. Tracing the edges of her cursive. Smelling the paper. Hearing her voice say my name the way no one else ever did. And by morning, something had changed in me. Not rage. Not revenge. Just clarity. And a quiet vow. They could keep the house. Keep the stories they built without me. Keep the locket, now cracked, hollow, carrying someone else's reflection. But I would carry the truth. In my own way. On my own terms. Because my mother did leave me something. Not property. Not jewelry. But voice. And they forgot that the voice they erased was the one that taught their daughter how to speak at all. I didn't fight to get the house back. Didn't drag anyone into court. Didn't call Lila, or her father, or anyone who might try to turn this into a debate. No more begging for space in a family portrait I wasn't even standing in anymore. Instead, I packed a small bag. Took the folder with my mother's will, and one photo, the real one. Her, me, and Lila. Blurry. Backlit. Perfect. I drove to the edge of town. Past the old train tracks. Down the road where the air smells like lilacs in spring and wood smoke in winter. To the house that used to be ours. It had changed. New shutters. A swing on the porch that hadn't been there before. The garden was wild now, roses untamed, lavender gone leggy. But I knew every crack in the driveway. I walked slowly through the gate. No one was home. Just the hum of bees and the rustle of leaves. I wasn't trespassing. Not in the way they might say. Not when my mother's name was still carved in the back porch beam. Faint but there. I crouched beside the garden bed and dug with my bare hands. Soft dirt. Warm. Alive. I planted a single thing. A cutting from my mother's lavender, saved from a pot on my own porch. Wrapped in a damp paper towel. Carried like something sacred. Next to it, I buried the cracked locket. Didn't polish it. Didn't clean it. Just pressed it deep into the earth. Let it go. Because if something needs to be stolen to be worn, then it was never meant to be passed down. Across the street, a little girl waved to me. Sticky fingers. Missing front tooth. She was painting rocks on her front lawn. Her mother came out, smiled. Are you lost? No, I said. Just returning something that was never theirs. She didn't ask questions. Just nodded. The way women sometimes do when they recognize a wound they've also worn. Later that day, I stopped by the local shelter. The women's one. Brought the donation I had prepared. The amount wasn't large. But it was enough. From the account I opened the day after the wedding, where I transferred every cent that came from my mother's assets. Lila would never know. But someone's daughter might have a safe night because of it. And that felt like the kind of legacy my mother would have smiled over. In the weeks that followed, I did something I hadn't done in years. I reclaimed my name. Not just on paper. Everywhere. I updated the DMV. Social Security. Took my maiden name back. Hung it on my front door like it belonged. Because it did. I started baking again. But only for people who knew the story behind the sugar. Only for those who didn't ask me to stay in the kitchen. There was a young woman in the apartment below mine. Single mom. Worked nights. I gave her my wedding dress. The one I had folded and refolded like memory. She cried. Said she'd never felt beautiful before. I told her, make sure no one ever makes you beg for a seat at your own celebration. She nodded like she believed me. And for the first time in a long time, so did I. One evening, I sat on the floor, sorting old boxes. Found the comb I'd meant to give Lila. The blue one. My mother's. Mine. Still wrapped. Still untouched. I placed it in a small velvet pouch. Wrote a note. But not to Lila. To myself. You were never invisible. They just closed their eyes. I placed it on the windowsill beside a jar of dried herbs. Let the light catch it each morning. A reminder, not of what I lost, but what I chose to release. Because there's a difference between being pushed out and walking away with your head high. I never got a thank you. Not for the cake. Not for the veil. Not for the pie tin. But I did get something else. Peace. Not the kind you ask permission for. Not the kind you hope gets handed back after an apology. The kind you claim when you decide your silence isn't owed. It's over. And somewhere in a drawer, in a house that was once mine, a woman will find an envelope, in her own daughter's name, with handwriting she thought she'd forgotten. And maybe she'll wonder, or maybe she'll never ask. But I no longer need her to. Because this story, it's mine now. Would you have walked away, or taken everything back? The voicemail came on a Tuesday. Afternoon light spilling through the kitchen window. The kind of stillness that feels earned. It was her voice. Lila's. Soft, careful. Hi, Mom. I was wondering if we could talk. I found something. I think I need to understand. She didn't say what it was. Didn't say sorry. Just I need to understand. I let the message sit for hours. Watched the little red light blink like a wound. Didn't press play again. Didn't save it either. That night, I made pie for the neighbor's daughter. The one I'd given my dress to. She was getting married in 2 weeks. Said she wanted something made with memory. I brought out the old tin, the second one. The one without initials. And I taught her how to fold the edges just so. How to crimp with care. How to press down without breaking the crust. When she asked me about my own daughter, I just smiled. Told her the truth. She's finding her way. The next day, I received a letter. In Lila's handwriting this time. No return address. Just 3 words inside. Was it real? I read it 5 times. No signature. No mention of the wedding. No mention of the locket. But I knew what she meant. She had found the envelope. The real one. The fake gift with my mother's name. And maybe she'd heard something in her father's voice. Something rehearsed too many times. Maybe she'd seen her own wedding photos and felt the hollow. Maybe she'd remembered me in pieces. I didn't write back. Not right away. Not with answers. Instead, I pulled out the recipe card. The one with my mother's handwriting. Peach pie, no cinnamon. The one she used to love. I copied it word for word. Included a single photo. Not of me. Not of Lila. But of the pie. Cracked crust. Golden. Real. I sent it without a note. Let her sit with that. The way I had sat with her silence. A week later, she showed up. At my door. Unannounced. No makeup. Hair pulled back. Eyes heavy like someone who hadn't slept right in days. She didn't hug me. Didn't cry. Just stood there holding the locket. It doesn't close anymore, she said. Voice barely above a whisper. It just stays open. Won't lock shut. I looked at it. Didn't reach for it. Didn't ask for it back. It never really did, I said. She looked down at her hands. The chain slipping between her fingers like guilt. Why didn't you tell me? I thought about everything I could say. Every moment she looked away when I tried to be seen. Every time she called someone else mama, with a laugh that used to belong to me. Instead, I asked, would you have heard me? She blinked. That was all. Silence. Not uncomfortable. Just true. I invited her in. Tea was already on the stove. Old habit. She walked slowly through my living room. Stopped at the windowsill. Picked up the blue comb. Turned it in her fingers. I remember this, she said. When I was little, you used it on me after baths. I nodded. Sipped my tea. She sat on the edge of the couch like someone waiting for news. But I had no revelations left. Only peace. And pie. I set a plate in front of her. Warm. Fresh. Just like the one she used to beg for after school. She took a bite. Tears welled. But she didn't let them fall. I don't know how it got this far, she whispered. I did. But I didn't say it. Because she wasn't here to be corrected. She was here to remember. For a long time, we sat in silence. Just the clink of her fork against the plate. She looked older than I remembered. And for the first time, I didn't see my baby girl. I saw a woman. One who had learned what it meant to reach back. Too late. When she stood to leave, she held out the locket. You should take this. I shook my head. I already buried the one that mattered. She looked confused. But she didn't press. At the door, she turned back. Can I try again? I smiled. Not cruel. Not warm. Just real. That depends, I said. Are you asking me to be your mother, or your memory? She didn't answer. Just left. No drama. No hugging in the rain. Just the soft click of the door closing. And I stood there, stronger than I'd ever been. Not because she came back, but because I didn't need her to. For a moment, I pitied them. Then I remembered who I was. I walked back inside, turned off the kettle, washed her plate, and dropped the voicemail recorder into the trash. Let the blinking red light go out for good. Do you believe quiet dignity is stronger than revenge? Summer came in slow that year, like it knew I needed gentler days. The garden I started behind my small home was beginning to take root. Nothing fancy. Just herbs, wild roses, a few vegetables the squirrels kept stealing. But it was mine. No seating charts. No rules about who stood where. Just sunlight and soil, and silence that didn't ask to be explained. I'd bought a new chair for the porch. Low-backed. Wide arms. Sturdy, not beautiful. The kind of chair you grow into. Not perform for. It sat empty for weeks. I wasn't ready. But one morning, after the first bloom of the lavender, I finally sat. And it held me. Not like a pedestal. Like a place. My place. I watched the neighborhood kids run barefoot through the sprinklers. Heard their mothers call out from porches. Laughed quietly when one of them fell and popped right back up. As if the earth meant nothing more than a chance to rise again. No one knew who I used to be here. Not the wife. Not the mother of the bride. Not the woman left in a locked kitchen with nothing but a pie tin and a shaking hand. Just me. And that was enough. The comb still sat on the windowsill. Not dusty. Not sacred. Just remembered. Sometimes I caught myself glancing at it. Not out of sadness. Out of clarity. It had made it through 3 generations. Not because it was valuable, but because it was held. One morning I took the comb, wrapped it in linen, and walked back to the house I had once called home. No one was there. The windows were dark. The porch empty. I walked to the base of the old oak tree. The one my mother planted when I turned 12. The one Lila used to climb in sundresses, dirt on her knees. And I buried it. The comb. No box. No words. Just earth. And breath. Some things don't need to be passed down. They just need to be put down. On the way home, I stopped by the stream. The one that ran behind the shelter. I'd been volunteering there. Teaching the women how to bake. Not for sale. Not for approval. For healing. There was a new girl, maybe 17. She had bruises in places she tried to hide. Didn't say much. But her hands were steady when she kneaded dough. I gave her my apron. The same one with the worn floral hem. She looked at it like it was too much. I told her, it's not for cooking. It's for becoming. She smiled. First time I'd seen her smile. That afternoon I took the key. The one from the mailbox at the wedding venue. The one I had kept on a chain out of habit. I stood on the bridge. Sun low, water warm with light. Held the key in my palm. It was small. Insignificant. But it had once decided where I belonged. What doors I was allowed to walk through. What voices I was allowed to raise. I closed my eyes. Breathed deep. And dropped it. No fanfare. No audience. Just one soft plink. And the ripple that followed. The current didn't care whose name it used to carry. It just took it. Away. They never apologized. Not really. And I stopped needing them to. Because forgiveness isn't something you give when someone asks. It's something you choose. When you're done bleeding for a wound that never belonged to you. Somewhere, Lila is living her life. Maybe she still has the locket. Maybe it sits in a drawer, cracked and quiet. Maybe she opens it sometimes, looking for answers. But the photo that's missing, the real one, that's mine now, framed in my hallway, hung beside the wooden spoon my mother gave me. There's a voice in that picture. Not loud, not shouting, but sure. I used to think I was the echo, the space between their decisions, the afterthought, the footnote. But I wasn't. I was the origin, the fire that warmed their table, the hands that stitched their celebration, the breath that gave their name meaning. And they tried to silence me. With locks. With lies. With empty seats. But I spoke anyway. Not in letters. Not in speeches. But in actions. In absence. In letting go. Because sometimes the most powerful thing a woman can do is walk away. Without asking permission. And stay gone. So here I am. In my chair. In my name. In my stillness. No applause. No parade. Just peace. Not the peace they gave me. The one I built. With every silent meal. Every crossed-out RSVP. Every gift left unopened. Every truth buried, then dug up again with my bare hands. And now I speak. Not loud, but clear. I was never the echo. I was the voice they tried to silence. The key I never gave became the one that freed me.